Good afternoon. I am humbled and honored to be here and incredibly thankful, not just for the warm introduction, but frankly for the leadership the PNC has shown to Baltimore and so many communities throughout, and for the chance to be here with you today. I didn't think that the first place I'd come to an area where there were no cars allowed would be in Michigan. At the same time, it becomes incredibly important that as we're talking about what does this mean for the future of Michigan, that we also never forget the other questions of, and when we say what does it mean for Michigan, the next question also must mean, and what does it mean for Detroit? Never forgetting about who it is that we need to be fighting for, and who it is that we need to be remembering, because we will never have inclusive conversations if only a slither of the population is part of the conversation. And we will never have progressive conversations if the only people being thought about in the conversation is a small portion.
Excellent. Obviously, I agree with 100% of what you said, and based on the response from the audience, I think you got a lot of them too.
Yeah.
But I want to talk to you about some of the challenges to the narrative you laid out here, which I think are very evident and are probably growing.
Yeah.
And let's start at the national level. And I'm not picking on anybody here, but Secretary of Housing and Urban Development,
Yep.
Ben Carson, a guy who grew up in the same city that I did,
Right. Very
similar city to the one you grew up in. He says poverty is a state of mind.
Yeah.
How do you answer that?
I disagree. And he spent, I have a great deal of respect, particularly for his narrative and his story. The fact that, again, he came up in communities that all of you know very well. He spent much of his adult life in communities that I know very well.
That's right.
In Baltimore. And I know that, his was a story, his was a book. That's actually one of the most transformative books that I read when I was coming up.
History behind those things.
And there's history.
Thing that we, I think, at least now are getting to a space where we can acknowledge.
That's right.
And have a conversation about. Another challenge is always, so what do you do, right?
Yeah.
Somebody says, I hear you, poverty is a function of systemic action and choice. How do we fix that?
Yeah.
How do we fix that? You talked about at the macro level.
Yeah.
What do we do?
Well, it's interesting because, and one of the reasons that I'm so excited about this room having this conversation is, to be clear, there isn't one element that got us into this situation, so there's not one element that's going to get us out. This is not something that philanthropy can simply say, well, it's too big for us, only the government can fix that, because we have a very real role in developing best practices. We have a very real role of taking ideas and concepts and bringing them to scale, and then helping the government then bring it to even a larger scale, right? We have to know that other institutions, such as the private sector, such as our other structural institutional sectors like education, play an incredibly important part in this work. And we have to, you take education as just one example. We know which things are working within education, and we know which things are not. And so understanding that, we cannot continue to protect things that aren't working because somehow it benefits, adults in that conversation.
Sure.
We have to make sure that the quality of our kids' education and their access to opportunity is first and foremost the way we make our decisions.
Yeah.